All right, so today we're diving into something pretty cool. A style of music that isn't really about telling some epic story, but is all about creating a vibe. Seriously. We're talking about Impressionist music and how some genius composers basically figured out how to paint pictures with sound. You know that feeling when you're playing a video game or watching a movie and the music just pulls you in? It doesn't have lyrics, it's not telling you what's happening, but it sets the whole mood. It kind of just hits different. Well, that's because it's acting like a filter, but for your ears instead of for a photo. And that's exactly what we're getting into today. So, to really get why this was such a game changer, you have to know what music was like before this. It was a lot. Think super heavy, really dramatic, always telling these massive stories. And there were so many rules. But then some composers in France were basically like, nah, we're done with this. They decided to trade all that drama for something more dreamy and atmospheric. Instead of a clear plot, they just wanted to suggest a feeling, a mood. They totally broke the old rules to make music that was way more fluid and free. So let's start right there. This first huge idea is that this music is all about creating a vibe, not telling a story. Okay, so what does Impressionist music actually mean? Well, it's about capturing a sensory impression, basically the feeling of a single moment. You know, like that feeling of watching fog burn off a lake in the morning, or the way light sparkles on water. These composers wanted to bottle up that exact feeling, but with sound. It's all about the mood, not a complicated plot. Here's probably the best way to think about it. The old, dramatic music is like a whole movie with a clear story, a beginning, middle, and end. But Impressionist music, that's more like the background music for a specific level in a video game. It's not telling you what to do next, it's creating the entire world around you. That creepy forest, that peaceful village, it's all about that immersive atmosphere. So, who were these masterminds, these musical rebels? Let's meet the composers who decided to just throw out the rulebook and invent something completely new. Okay, so the two main players you've got to know are Claude Debussy and Maurice Ravel. Debussy was kind of the pioneer, the guy who really wanted to create a sound that was fresh and super French. And Ravel was an absolute genius at using different instruments to create amazing sonic colors. Their goal was pretty simple, just break free from the old kind of stuffy traditions and do something new. And here's a little fun fact. They both actually kind of hated being called Impressionists. They thought the name put them in a box, but hey, it stuck. So, the big question is, how did they do it? What were their secrets? It's time to open up the Impressionist toolkit and see what kind of gear they were working with. It really boils down to four main techniques, or you could even call them cheat codes. First, they used these amazing, lush chords. Second, they found new scales to unlock totally different moods. Third, they started mixing instruments together like a painter mixes colors on a palette. And fourth, they blurred the beat, making everything feel way more flexible. Let's break each one down. First up, these lush chords. Now, in most music, chords are like words in a sentence. They have to follow a certain grammar to make sense. But these composers started using these really rich, complicated chords just because they sounded beautiful all by themselves. Think of it like a painter putting a single dab of color on a canvas. It doesn't have to lead anywhere, it's just there to be gorgeous. Next up, they started using new scales. They were tired of the same old happy and sad-sounding scales everyone else was using. So they grabbed scales that sounded way more mysterious and dreamy, or ones that had more of an ancient, folky vibe. And the effect is huge. It makes the music just kind of float. There's no strong feeling that it needs to resolve or go back to a home note. It feels just like when you're exploring a huge open-world map in a game, with no specific quest marker to follow. Okay, their third tool was the sound palette. And this is where they really became painters. They used instruments specifically for their texture and color. So you'd combine a flute and a harp to create the sound of shimmering light on water. You'd mute the strings to make them sound like a soft fog. Brass instruments weren't used to be loud and heroic. They were used quietly to make a warm, gentle glow. And woodwinds could sound like distant bird calls or whispers. So cool. And the final piece of the puzzle, they blurred the beat. You know that strong, steady pulse you can tap your foot to in most songs? Yeah, they pretty much got rid of it. They hid the pulse, so the music just kind of breathes and flows. Time feels super flexible. It's less like a ticking clock and more like the natural rhythm of the wind or waves on the shore. And this quote really sums up their entire philosophy. Just like painters from the same time like Claude Monet, the goal was never to create a perfect high-definition photograph of something. It was to capture a fleeting impression, that quick snapshot of a feeling, a mood, a single moment in time. Okay, so I know what you're probably thinking. This all happened like 100 years ago. Why should you care? Well, in this last part, we're going to connect the dots from these old school composers directly to the music you listen to today. No, seriously, a bunch of French guys from the late 1800s? What does any of this have to do with you, right now scrolling on your phone or hopping into your favorite game? Well, the truth is, you hear their influence everywhere. The huge, atmospheric music in movie soundtracks that gives you chills, total Impressionist vibe. Those incredibly immersive soundscapes in video games that make you feel like you're actually in that world, that's their legacy. Jazz musicians took those lush, colorful chords and ran with them. And yeah, even your favorite lo-fi chill beats to study to playlist is built on the exact same idea, using sound to create a mood. So look, if you only remember one thing from all of this, make it this. Impressionist music proved to the world that sound doesn't need a big, complicated story to be powerful. It just needs to create a mood. It just needs to make you feel something. And that kind of leaves us with one last question to think about. The next time you put your headphones on, just pause for a second and think, what mood does the soundtrack of your life create?